Hi, my name is Ashley Rivera, and this is my appendage, better late than never, to the interview that I conducted with Derek Sitter on the 28th of April, 2023. Um, Derek is a filmmaker, a, a brilliant, compassionate filmmaker. And I don't use those adjectives lightly, by the way, but you'll see for yourself. He is a filmmaker and an actor. He's a member of SAG and an elected lifetime member of the Actors Studio, which is a really cool factoid that I don't think we actually got around to mentioning in the interview, which is really strange. Anyway, we launched our chat right off the bat. We talked about BUGTUSSLE because that's essentially the big thing that's happening right now. That is his short film. Well, kind of long for a short film, as he says, but nevertheless, it is still racking up awards on the film festival circuit right now. It had recently picked up another of a growing list of awards, and you will learn all about that in the interview. He ended up surprising me with quite an education about the way that different filmmakers, including himself, approach sentimentality in their films. Sentimentality was not something I had ever really given much thought to. He named Martin McDonagh very specifically and emphatically as a filmmaker whose approach to that very concept he greatly admires. He also named Spielberg in contrast as someone who is more manipulative and I guess, shall we say, overindulgent when it comes to sentimentality. Derek obviously vastly prefers the way McDonagh is never excessive or prolonged in his use of the sentimental. And I was absolutely riveted during this part of the conversation. Derek also amazed me with his words about new beginnings. Like so many playwrights and filmmakers whom he admires, he prefers the new beginning. I really enjoyed the part when he recalls the dialogue in True West by Sam Shepard. One brother said to the other brother, I love sunsets. And the other brother said he prefers the new beginnings, actually, the sunrise. And it opens up a new beginning, an ending really is a beginning. And I just think that's such a powerful concept. And it's so true. And we see this in Derek's films, in BUGTUSSLE, so it's so prevalent. The interview was about 2.5 hours long total. It might have been 3 hours, but cutting out some of the unnecessary things, we've whittled it down a little bit. That's why at first I released it in 4 parts. However, in this version, it's all smushed together. Derek was very keen to talk about the film that he is currently conceiving, the intriguingly titled Brain Slut. He sent me the script for Brain Slut to read before the interview, and he amazed me again when he mentioned that Brain Slut will be a complete departure or largely a departure from his normal way of shooting films. Instead of the more character dialogue driven approach we see in Bug Tussle and TUTU Grande, his 2018 film, Brain Slut will be his first foray into a much more visually centered approach. Derek was very forthcoming about his personal struggles and the way they have influenced, driven, and inspired his execution as a filmmaker. He touched briefly on his early life in Oklahoma, but it was actually the real catalyst that opened him up on this lifelong devotion to a creative life was his experience at LSU as a student, as a graduate student in the MFA program, studying under acting professor John Dennis. Yeah, so there's more about that in the post-interview article that I wrote. I'll put the link in the show notes, among other relevant links. Now, I really hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did, as much as I enjoyed listening to Derek. And so without further ado, I give you Derek Sitter.
You know who I am, you weird son of a bitch.
Okay. Wow.
Go ahead.
Wow, that was fun. Okay. All right. So Mr. Derek Sitter, welcome. Thank you for meeting with me.
Of course, my pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So as you can see, I wanted to start out with BUGTUSSLE because that's what's kind of happening right now. I mean, you just got back, you're in Oregon again, you're at home in Oregon, but you were in Atlanta recently. Yep. You don't mind, let's dive right into what's going on with BUGTUSSLE. It's obviously winning an incredible amount of awards. And what the latest award, Best Dark Comedy at well, I'm gonna give you the floor. Tell me all about it. So
well, it was at Atlanta After Dark Film Festival.
Okay.
And it's part of the film festival circuit that I think they have about 32 festivals across the country. And they were also the Oregon Short Film Festival. So it's not necessarily the same people, but they are the same organization. And we're always in Atlanta. We were at Southern Shorts Awards, which was also in Atlanta. I've been there before at live events. This past year was a virtual event. And I think we wrapped up 3 or 4 awards there at the Southern Shorts, and then went to Atlanta After Dark with, no real expectations. I just love traveling, going to film festivals. Wow. And I was spending a week checking out Atlanta, checking out the market, checking out, even home prices, things about maybe a possibility of moving there, and went to the festival that day. And yeah, they called BUGTUSSLE. And the funny thing, and this goes along with pretty much my entire career, is a lot of the times you don't submit your categories. You just submit, and usually the category is short film. Sometimes more genre specific film festivals, they'll ask you, what category are you submitting in? But it's interesting that regionalisms exist so much, and but particularly in the States, that you could watch BUGTUSSLE in Texas, which we were there. And it was a dark, no, it was a comedy in Texas. In Atlanta, it was a dark comedy. And in Oregon, it was a dark drama. So the response, the reaction of BUGTUSSLE, and it was similar with TUTU GRANDE as well, is all over the map. And I actually love that, because it's been kind of a constant within my work in my career, is particularly in the film industry, not so much in the theater, but in the film industry, is people need stereotypes, people need prototypes. They need labels so they know where to place things. I never fit into any of them. Like I was just an actor from Oklahoma. It was a little wild, a little crazy. Find out a little later, he's a little bipolar. But the energy of the the work, the influences of the work, I've never genrefied anything in my life. You just trust a vision, and you execute it. And yeah, I think I probably am a little aware that some of my stuff's a little outrageous. Sometimes as much as I try to avoid sentimentality, I'd like to think it's more, always has some heart and some passion behind it, rather than wallowing in sentimentality. But with BUGTUSSLE, the response is all over the map.
Yeah,
it's fascinating to me how different, because some people literally love BUGTUSSLE and others absolutely hate it. I'm like, okay.
But you mentioned that you try to avoid sentimentality. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a lot of, and particularly with the influences, particularly the writing influences, there's a lot of, cinema and theater, and I would even say novelists, that really dive into sentimentality and try to tug on the heartstrings. And that goes with, not only maybe the performances, but, the very melancholy sound design, and they're really just kind of sucking you in, looking for a tearjerker type moments. Some are just genuinely heartfelt and you end up crying. But there are a lot of filmmakers and playwrights and directors that really go after that. They want to be a little heavy-handed at tugging on the heartstrings. Well, there's some moments in pretty much all my work where there's a potential for that. And I so hate it that I want you to empathize. I want you to be invested into the characters. But probably most of the influences I have towards the writing portion are playwrights. And some of my favorite playwrights are, Sam Shepard, of course, David Mamet, Martin McDonough, Edward Albee, Harold Pinter. They're the perfect examples of avoiding sentimentality, and how they do that. And it's not necessarily a story device. I just think organically they understand that, I know this is probably a moving moment that they've written that's probably quite heartfelt. But right at the moment where it may seem to be a tad heavy-handed, they'll insert some comedy or something random or something irreverent that just takes you out of that. Like, I've accomplished what I've done. Now we're going to move on. Where other times I see directors just wallow in, let's just say it's a funeral, and everybody's very moved, and you'll hear the music, and you'll see all the, it's just, and it's so manipulative, and it's just so, and I shut off as a viewer. I just shut off. I'm like, just take me out of this. But like McDonough's brilliant at it, particularly in Banshees of Inisherin, but his plays like Pillowman and Beauty Queen of Lanaine and almost all of his work, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, he knows when things are, and Sam Shepard was great at it too. They know when things are potentially moving, but they're not going to wallow in the sentimentality of the circumstance. And it's important, I think, to avoid that. Yeah. And it's kind of like Shepard said. Shepard had opportunity in all of his work where things could have been written and ending to where it's quite moving and it's quite tidy at the end. But he never did that, because he always says he prefers beginnings and new beginnings. And that's how I always love to, like, when I start thinking about wrapping up a film or a story, even if I'm directing a play, I'm going to wrap this up as a new beginning, perhaps a little hope, along with some tragedy or some comedy, whatever it is. And like True West is a perfect example. It could have been, it's so ambiguous how he ends the play with the two brothers just staring at one another, not knowing exactly what their future is. And it's ideal. And if you look at McDonough, it's if you've seen Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, the whole objective from Frances McDormand was to, catch her daughter's killer. But when you get to the ending, and no spoilers, but if you get to the ending, she never accomplished that goal whatsoever, even though that ended up being the plot of the film. But what they did accomplish in the ending, to me, was much more profound. And same thing with Banshees of Inisherin. It was much more profound ending and ambiguous, but more importantly, I think, a new beginning. And I think that's why I like to think of it as absurdity, particularly from theater of the absurd, that when you look at like work of Edward Albee, he does the same thing. And if you look at the work of Steven Spielberg, it's profoundly different because he's always tugging at your heartstrings. Oh. And I find it manipulative. I think they know exactly what they're doing. They're master craftsmen. They just tell stories, wrap them up in tidy little packages, and tug on your little heartstrings to make sure you have a happy little ending. And that work just doesn't interest me. So
yeah, they kind of get you with the music. They really do. But
yeah, and, there are always the little children involved and the teary-eyed, and it's just it's fine. If that, it's just not my thing. It's the new beginning thing that I love so much. And Shepard he was quoted saying that in an interview, and and in fact, it's actually in the dialogue of True West.
I haven't
where because one of them's a writer.
Okay.
And he says, they're both very intoxicated, I think, in the third act, and the writer says, I can't remember which one says what, but one says I love beginnings, because I think the Morning Sun was coming out. And the other one says, I always preferred endings myself, or something like that. Or but that was a through line through all of his work. Along with his father, of course.
And yours too. I mean, BUGTUSSLE I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the ending is totally a new beginning. I mean, you have no idea what's going to happen with Crow. You just don't. You're like, okay, anything could happen.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's an ending for
Yeah.
sure, but it's not tidy, where we know exactly what happened and here's the end. Thank you for watching. It's you don't I think all great stories, and I'm not saying my stories are great, but I think all great stories leave, and I'm not saying leaving open for a sequel. I'm saying they leave it open for the viewer or the reader to let that journey continue with their own experiences and references. And I think it's probably different for everybody who watches it. I've been with people who've asked me what happened at the end, and I just always said, "What do you think?" I mean, that's the ending. What do you think? And I remember one guy said something to me. Said, "Well, he heard the silent signal." I'm like, certainly a possibility. And I was even proud somebody picked that up, because that was very specific dialogue. But yeah, it is Crow's story one, and you had to have Crow's through line from point A to point B, and what happens at the end is Crow's story.
Yeah.
And you have, when you write anything, it's character and conflict. And if you look at Crow, he's in a good amount of conflict and obstacles, and Coy being the biggest one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in storytelling, and fundamentally, it's pretty simple. But within the story, I'd hoped to reveal a great deal about who these people were. And then when you start thinking about an ending, sometimes I have an ending before I have a beginning. And I never really know. Sometimes I look back at endings when I've written something or directed something, look back on it, and I have no idea where it came from. To this day, I probably don't know why I wrote that, but I know it wasn't in the original.
Oh, okay. The original being the Coy and Crayon.
Well, this story's been around for a long time in my head. I think the first time I was doing a showcase in Los Angeles, and it was about six of us. Everybody was doing a one man, 6-7 minute performance, and I preferred to do a scene, so I wrote this short 5-minute scene called Poncho and Lefty. And it was same circumstance, trapped in this barn. And then that was it with that. But many years later, we were doing another one of those 72-hour film challenges. And I'm like, oh, I have a script. And so we went, found a location, and I cast one of my students. And I think we did that in 2 shots. And that was Coyote No Crow. Then it stayed in my computer forever. But I'd written a full-length feature of Poncho and Lefty. and the of course the Crow character was Pancho. He was Hispanic, and then eventually it turned into this 20-minute short, which is just the ending. There, I tried to put as much history and backstory of each character in the dialogue and in the performances as I could in the 20 minutes, but there's still a whole lot you don't know how they got in this situation to start with. And that's Amp and Darlene, and there's the gambling, the cockfights. I mean, there's a lot that led them up to this point. That there's a lot of story there.
Yeah.
So it still may end up being a feature.
Well, that would be cool. When are people going to be able to? I mean, is it going to stream at some point?
Yeah.
Okay.
The festivals, TUTU Grande was in festivals forever, and I think it's still in festivals. Because I get hit up and people asking me, directors ask me, hey, can you please submit TUTU Grande? And they give me a waiver code, and I'll say sure. In fact, we were just in one in Berlin, and but it's usually a couple of years.
Okay.
In the festival circuit, depending on how successful it is. I think BUGTUSSLE is too long for a lot of festivals. 20 minutes is really pushing it. Now, for short film festivals, 20 minutes is more acceptable. I judge film festivals, so when I see a 20-minute short, I go, okay, this better be good. Because it's 20 minutes. There's a 5-minute shorts. There are micro shorts. There are mid-length shorts. 20 minutes is a long short. 30 minutes is a really long short. But if you're submitting to film festivals, what's interesting, especially some of the bigger ones, because I understand, I've been going to festivals since the 90s, and the one thing that I've noticed, that particularly with short films, if you're going into some of the bigger festivals, sometimes a short will begin a block of right before a feature. So a 5 to 10 minute short fits in there perfectly to screen prior to a feature. Because, they get so many submissions, they only have so much time throughout the festival to screen these films. And some of these festivals screen your film 3 or 4 times throughout the weekend. So you're traveling to different theaters, watching your film and doing the Q&A. A 20-minute short is hard to fit because it's a lot of time, because some festivals only have so much time.
Right.
So they may not even watch it. They may see the 20 minutes and go, yeah, no, not enough time. And so you have to be really, really aware, particularly in the circuit. But to answer your question, is when I start getting more selections or more rejections, I'll get more of an idea of how long BUGTUSSLE will be in the circuit before it goes public, because it's usually required that it is not public. And they love premieres. They love premieres in their own city. They love premieres in their own state, perhaps. And if you're public anywhere, YouTube, Vimeo, Amazon, Netflix, wherever, you're immediately declined because you're public. So you just give it time and wait.
So it could be a couple of years
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of festivals we're waiting, because some festivals, may have two a year. There are some that are actually monthly. There are some that are quarterly. Um, so the ones that are like once a year, they have one festival, 4 days uh, a year, a Thursday through a Sunday. So you're still waiting on the selection for the 2023 festival. And the notification date may not be till June, may not be till October. So I don't know. So I can't, until I get the rejection or selection, I can't go public, because
Right.
it's an immediate rejection as soon as they find out you're public.
Okay. So I think a great through line for everything is with your films, with all of them, I think the biggest through line that I can see is that you're writing about people that are, they're obviously at the bottom. Crow and Coyote are certainly they can't there's no way out for them. I mean, maybe with Crow at the end with again, I don't want to do the spoil it, but you don't kind of know what he's going to do at that point. But I don't know, for me, I kind of assume that he's going to continue. I don't know that he's going to be able to get out of trouble. What is it, about
Broken people.
Yeah, broken people. There you go. That's it. Broken.
Yeah, I mean, that's not only as an actor, and director and writer,
Yeah.
that's always what I'm attracted to. I find them the most interesting people. Even when I was in college, those were the characters I wanted. I wanted to dive into these broken human beings. And I think I don't necessarily think of theme when I'm writing or directing. I certainly am aware that it's there, but story's king. I try to tell the story. But for me, and my approach is, because I'm an actor and classically trained as an actor, I'm always approaching it through a character study. And for me, probably because where I grew up, or I should say where I was born, in Oklahoma, and the people that I was surrounded by in small town Oklahoma. Then eventually, regardless of my experiences, eventually, when I became aware that there was something wrong with me, and other people have always known there was a little something off, and there were words like edgy and crazy, and my nickname at LSU was Crazy D. That's what everybody called me. And I took that with pride. I was like, yeah, you're right. And I still, at this point, I still do. People, that term crazy in a good way, whatever that bullshit means. But to me, and it will always be a through line, and there's that, everyone has a story.
Yeah.
And I always like to think of it like, if you read a headline online on some news site of what occurred in BUGTUSSLE, it would tell you zero about who these people were. They're only going to mention the crime and the crimes committed. They're never going to explain their story. I'm always interested in people and I still see it every day, that you could be walking down the street and you see the guy who clearly got something going on. He may be talking to himself. He may be, twitching. There's something, and people will make a point to avoid them. Whereas I think I'm the guy that's going to go out and say, "Hey, man, how are you?
Yeah.
How can I help you? What's going on today?" Because I understand them, and I want to know how I can help. And I've always been that way since I was a kid. There's that phrase where always be kind, because everyone's got going through a struggle or has a story that you know nothing about, and it's so true. And I'm sure a lot of it's influenced. Watching my father as a child struggle with mental illness, and there was always, particularly where I grew up, again where I was born. I certainly didn't grow up in Oklahoma. There was always addiction, mental health issues, trauma. It's a completely different family dynamic in southeastern Oklahoma. I don't know why. There's nothing necessarily right or wrong about it. It's just the culture. And then it eventually led to my own personal struggles with. It's interesting. When you're bipolar, particularly the manic portion of it, which is where most people saw me most of the time, and like, wow, what's going on with this guy? He's just kinetic. It's constant. I didn't understand it. Didn't care to think about it. I just did it, and there was nothing wrong with it. Especially in your 20s. I mean, it was your superpower. It's like, let me go on stage. Let's go. And why they call it manic depressive, bipolar, eventually that's going to crash. Now, that's the ugly darkness of the disorder, and particularly bipolar depression. It's profoundly different than someone who is suffering from just depression, because people who are depressed can be prescribed an antidepressant. There are other things you can do. You can't do that with a bipolar because they're already so jacked up that, and I've had doctors make the mistake. Oh, well, here's this. I was a guinea pig. Try this. Lost my mind every time I took one. And I didn't know why. I didn't know why, but I got to where I was so sick, and it was probably 5 years into being in LA, and then at that point I was working a lot, and I got to the point where I just had to quit because I couldn't audition, I couldn't, I couldn't, I couldn't do anything, and I got to the point where I just had to quit because I couldn't audition, I couldn't, I couldn't do anything. And I couldn't. I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. And I couldn't. I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. And I couldn't. I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. And but through the journey of becoming well again and understanding darkness so clear, and understanding suicidal ideation, and understanding the intense darkness and hopelessness, to where if you're lucky enough, you come out of it and you've learned to stabilize it and not only learn how to cope with it, but how to actually use it to your advantage. But because of what I went through and how I came out, and literally, metaphysically, metaphorically woke up to presence, I had the ability to look back on and go, I don't think people truly, truly understand the struggles that every human being deal with, maybe on a daily basis, regardless if they're bipolar or not. There's so many things impact our behavior and how we deal and cope with daily circumstances. I'm interested in those people. I'm interested in telling their stories. I am interested in revealing that, and I think we talked about it briefly in chat, that, I'd like it to be as common to walk into a room, and I do it, but I like it to be common, if that, hey, I'm bipolar and I suffer from acute anxiety disorder because of it. And I'm also a highly sensitive artist. So I function a little differently than most people. So me actually doing the work or writing work, it comes, I wouldn't say necessarily easy for me, but it comes to me organically and celestially to where I can execute it. But me and sitting in this room with 5 of you on leather couches, putting a lot of pressure on me. If I could have 20 seconds, that'd be great. So I can just break the ice and do what you need me to do. That's not even allowed. You're probably not even going to get the job because you said it. I don't need the crazy person on set. But if I walked in and said, you know what, my blood sugar's low, I have diabetes, if I could have 20 seconds just so I can, or I'm on cancer medication, I'm going through chemotherapy, so if I can have, 10 minutes, not a problem. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'd prefer that we look at people that are broken, and there's a long history of artists that, particularly ones in their 20s, that's about when it hit me really hard, that their disorder, whatever it is probably the source of their gift. Yeah. They're remarkably creative people, but there's a long history of these broken people that you could look at and go, I can't believe this person didn't make it past 27. And I look at it and go, I know exactly why they didn't make it at 27. They didn't have the coping skills to deal with who they were. Nobody has the coping skills at 27 to deal with that shit. Nobody. Right. So I would rather tell, like when I see these biopics, I get so frustrated and I can't watch them. Like I hated Elvis. I just couldn't watch it because it was a similar with Bohemian Rhapsody. It's like, you know what? Why don't we look at why they're gone? They're the struggles. Let me understand them more. Let me really get in. People go, oh, that's too dark. People don't want to see that. You don't know what people want to see. Show how Freddie Mercury had struggles and why he was so damn gifted. Elvis, when his mother died, was one of he even said it, one of the most profound moments of his life. And when they told the story, I think a scene was he was in his mother's closet or holding on his sleeve or something. Like, really, seriously, that's what you're going to give him?
Sentimentality. Yeah.
It was only sentimental and, manipulative. It didn't reveal anything to me.
Yeah.
It broke the man. It broke him.
Yeah.
So I'm interested, probably will spend the rest of my life telling stories about people that I think most people wouldn't even give a second glance on the street.
Yeah.
Or may label them like, stay away from them, they're crazy. I like those people.
Yeah. Yeah, me too, actually.
So empathizing. So if you look in short, and I'm not going to give away in BUGTUSSLE, but because we're talking about BUGTUSSLE, if you look at what these two men did, if you just listed what they did, their actions.
Shot, a farmer, shot the lady.
Teller,
yeah.
the other one shot somebody else. I mean, they're criminals.
Yeah.
They're murderers. They're addicts. Where that's all you're going to hear about.
Yeah. Yeah.
My goal in telling the story was, I'm hoping that you forgot all about that. You started understanding about the relationship of these two guys.
Actually,
and empathizing with them. And even if you don't empathize with them, at least you're understanding them and where they came from. And that's the goal. And you almost forget about, these are really not really good people.
I did forget about it. Actually, I barely kind of even thought about the bank teller that was shot, because I'm like, who are these people? Like, that's what I wanted to know as a viewer. And then, okay, let's do a little segue into TUTU GRANDE, because I think you kind of flipped the script there, right? I mean, is that kind of a way to put it? Like, it's almost like, so the crime was the rape, but actually the story is the father trying to get consequences. I love that word that you use in the movie, the consequences. You need to know there need to be consequences. And
what are those consequences? That's something I love to explore. I've done a lot of research on the death penalty, and I've always thought to myself, in studies, that is that really a consequence? I mean, it's certainly an option for many states. Eye for an eye is like, this is the way it's going to go, man. But I did explore with that story. Because again, you are looking at a rapist, and you're looking at a father. And if you kind of delve into the character of the father a little bit, you probably get to understand that he's probably not a very good person either. And that this is probably not going to end very well. But what it came to initially, when I started writing the dialogue, essentially it was a monologue at that point about consequences and about trauma, and about what are these consequences. And he goes through them and uses examples of what trauma could be.
Do you understand trauma?
What?
Trauma, trauma.
Like in
football when they get hit in it.
Like that?
But when getting to the ending wasn't a trick. I mean, there's a lot of writers who love to make a surprise twist for the sake of having a surprise twist. And sometimes I think they're fine. Sometimes I'm like, that's just a trick. And anybody could have written that. In fact, there was a complete alternate ending to BUGTUSSLE that we should talk about one time. But what you have to look at whose story is TUTU GRANDE. I mean, is it the rapist? Is it the father? Who's growing? Who's changing in that story? And that's when I consciously went, the father, probably under any other circumstance or any other time of this circumstance, we probably pretty sure what this man's going to do. This is going to be something that he's going to have a pretty violent response to. But that didn't interest me so much. What interested me was, how could he possibly grow from this? And not only grow as himself, from experiencing trauma himself, but how could he actually help the young man truly understand and truly have a impact, a forever impact and trauma? That's when I finally came up with the ending, like, oh, I got it. And that's when I revealed the ending.
Okay.
That I think people are often surprised, like, whoa, didn't expect that. But it was more that I wanted to explore another way of, outside of violence, outside of, the typical ways we deal with this, is maybe this is his way of forgiving this young man, but not without a consequence. He's going to go, like he says, I'm going to go home and I'm going to take care of my little girl. And he does. And maybe that's not something he would have normally done. I believe stories should try to capture the climaxes of life, the extraordinary moments of someone's life. And I think this was a very, 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 very important for all the characters involved. A significant moment in their lives that likely changed them all forever. And it's not people say things that it's challenging, it's suspenseful, it's intense, and I don't think about things like that when I write. I write about challenging material, but I don't think about it as challenging material. I go straight to the gut, because I don't see light without extreme darkness. So that's just where I go, because of what we talked about earlier. I have to see the darkness. we have to see, even with the new script, I mean, it doesn't get much darker in a human's being's life to where he's at right now at the beginning of this film, and exploring how they're going to get out of it. That's character in conflict, where start with the darkness and the perhaps the tragedy, and then take them to a journey to where maybe we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but at least we saw them try to get out of it. And that's where I start. Layers and layers and layers of biography that's as specific as yours and mine, and then add a bunch of other layers that are damaged.
Wow. Okay. So how did you get into filmmaking? Where did it start for you?
So at this, after graduate school, I started working right away. Graduated in 94. I think I got my SAT card in 95. I started working consistently. And so as an actor, being, in film and television, commercials, music videos, etc., it was interesting is it never really was enough. Theater was always plenty, because you've got 6 weeks of rehearsal, sometimes 3 weeks of rehearsals, just depending on the production. You get time to develop these characters. You really get time to rehearse with the other people, and it's a much more gratifying experience for me as an artist. Oftentimes, if you really dive into a character and really dive into the story, the moment once you reach the green room, when the production's over and the show's over, there's an exhilaration there that it's almost impossible to explain. That this is what I'm supposed to do. I've just emptied a vessel. I've just left everything I have on the stage. Film television rarely gives you that opportunity. John will tell you the same thing. John even mentioned that BUGTUSSLE is like one of the most challenging things he's done in 33 years. And that's why theater offers, and so many, celebrity actors go back to the theater, because that's where they're challenged. But so after I quit in LA, due to illness and some other factors, a lot of it was because I didn't like it. I think part of maybe my depression was just like, okay, I'm on TV, I'm doing movies, I'm doing whatever kid in Oklahoma dreamed about doing, but there's nothing satisfying. I did do that, my first play, and I think I sent you a page of some of the reviews, and won lots of awards and nominated for one of the biggest ones in Southern California. Leslie Jordan, do you know Leslie Jordan, the actor who recently passed? He'd actually won that category that year, and we'd become friends during that time. But that play, they actually, the director went to the actor studio and said, I need a young actor. I need the best young actor you guys got. And they said, you need Derek Sitter. So I didn't even audition for the play. He said, it's all yours. You came highly recommended. I said, I don't know, man. I didn't come to LA to do theater. Let me read the script. So I read the script, and as soon as I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, let's do this. And he told me who some of the other actors were in it. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. I said, let's do it. So that was a very gratifying experience, and quite challenging and rewarding.
That was
But
that was
2001, The Dead Boy.
the play, yeah, The Dead Boy by Joseph Pintaro. Okay.
Yep. And Stephen Nichols and Cyril O'Reilly was in it as well. And the place, it was packed so loud every night because of Stephen Nichols.
Wow.
Because he's a soap star.
Okay. You played
He's a fine actor. He's a fine actor as well.
Yeah.
But he was Patch on Days of Our Lives. I mean, it was Patch, and he was a big deal. People were traveling from all over the country to see this play.
Oh.
And we even had to extend it. In fact, we were running during 9/11.
Oh, wow.
We actually had to cancel for a week and had to determine if we're going to continue doing this or not, because different world now.
Yeah, okay.
But when my wife and I had our daughter, and we decided, okay, that LA's done. I'm done with LA. There's nothing here for me. I don't want to do this anymore. And so in short is, during my own recovery process of understanding bipolar disorder and understanding medication and how to stabilize and how to use it, it was about a 5-year nasty struggle that I had to figure out. And that's when it eventually led to teaching again, and to Volcanic Theatre Pub, and doing more theater, and doing theater on my terms, and doing the theater, well, I'm directing this play, and I'm also in it by default because I don't have the luxury of a lot of actors living in Bend, Oregon. And that's when I started just doing plays and plays and plays and plays. And then I've always been interested in making film. But how it first started was one of these 72-hour film challenges. I said, you know what? Just like the putting on the hits thing, I had the driving around in my red Firebird in the 80s, and if something comes on the radio, I'm like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But then something came up that, hey, 72-hour film challenge. And I'm like, you know what? I can do this. Let's do it. And you go and you sit on a Thursday evening, and they give you a theme or a line or whatever. And then you have 72 hours. You have to submit by 8 p.m. on Sunday night. So that's when I made my first film. And then I was hooked, because I knew I could do it as actor, director, and writer. I knew I could. I always knew I could direct and act, particularly in the theater. It was one of my heroes is Gary Sinise. He did that a ton at Steppenwolf. And for filmmaking, it was always, my model was always Sling Blade. Like, well, this is a bit about Thornton. He's no slouch. I mean, he wrote, directed, and starred in this thing, and he made it for $1 million. Like, that's impressive. And he also had a 20-minute short of the film prior to doing the feature.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh, this is the perfect model. Like, kind of cut your chops as a writer and as a director in some shorts, and then eventually, jump into a feature and see where it takes you. But it's all, everything's a learning process. But once I did the first short micro 72-hour challenge, I'm like, yeah.
Okay.
Particularly when you write it, it is challenging work. It's satisfying to dive into these characters. And what's really cool about it, and I don't know how a lot of other actors work, but when I'm doing a play, particularly if the character is quite broken and very damaged, my recovery process from those characters were never pleasant. I really didn't have the coping mechanisms, or I wasn't really equipped to deal with leaving the character. That's not how I work. I jump in and I stay in. And when you stay in and you believe the circumstances of these characters and their history, and you dive into it and you truly believe it, your body responds accordingly. And you will get sick if you dive into these. So I had to also learn during the, and this was being in and out of psych wards, learning how to cope with just playing these characters. So the thing about film and shooting film and writing for film is, all right, I only have to do this twice. Unlike a play, I'm gonna have to do this for 3 months, and I'm not gonna make it, because there's no pretend with me. I don't.
What do you mean twice? I don't understand.
Well, 2 takes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go to this scene and do it in 2 takes.
Okay.
So you guys better get it, because it's all I got. Unlike in a play, you're going to go deal with them circumstances, for, depends on the play, of course, but you're going to deal with a 6-week run, maybe more if it gets extended. And a lot of actors are equipped and trained to where they're solid at going in and have a technically proficient performance and go out, do their thing, go to the green room, go out to the party, go home, whatever they want to do. I don't have that ability. Still don't. I have to recover, because I'll be in the green room and I'll be a wreck. So the good thing about film, and why I'm pushing more towards writing challenging material for film, one, it's satisfying to jump in those circumstances. It's rewarding to tell the stories with other artists that are all on the same page, trying to execute this story. And the recovery process is much shorter, because even in one particular scene in BUGTUSSLE, for me, was particularly difficult, and I didn't say difficult, but unpleasant experience to go through.
Pop, 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 poke a fucking hard. Pop, 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 suck it, you wheel. I'll kick your ass. Hey, you want to tell a story?
No, you tell it,
Well,
baby.
then shut the fuck up, you weird son of a bitch.
Go to Disneyland.
You never told me that.
Well, I mean, it was going to be a surprise. All the bright lights, the rides, Mickey Mouse, Space Mountain, Mad Tea Party.
Forky?
Yeah, sure.
Mama never took me anywhere. No. She took me to Kern County Fair once, bought me a pickle.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But I only had to do it twice. Then it was okay.
Yeah.
I've learned that, when you're running a play, it's weeks of rehearsals and then weeks of performance. You get on set. John and I rehearsed a lot prior to, like in Zoom like this, and in person in Los Angeles. So we kind of knew the dynamics of the scenes before we jumped on set, which is pretty rare. Whoa. So went dark.
Oh,
Oh, there we go.
okay. Because there are so many streams that I want to follow. Like your life is, I mean, it's talk about telling stories. Like you've got a lot of stories in there. But I love how earlier you mentioned how playwriting and theater, that was your inspiration more than anything else with the filmmaking. It all came out of like playwrights are more of an inspiration to you than other filmmakers even. And now you mentioned it again, how the theater is so much more interesting to you, even as a writer and as a filmmaker, than anything you ever did in LA. And I totally get that, because I mean, how can I not? Like, theater is much more interesting than anything we could see on TV. But
oh, in the light, and you're in a room, a little small black box theater, which I prefer, and you're in that room.
Yeah.
And you see these characters right there, maybe 10, 15 feet from you, talking at the volume you and I are right now. And it's so brutally honest and so genuine and so authentic that it's inescapable. So they can't help but become involved. And that's one thing I love about the theater, is the sweat, the tears, the struggle, the triumphs. It's right there. And I think as an attendee, as an artist, as a performer, everybody involved that's inside that room, that's a magical place. Yeah. If you can somehow capture that in a film, and I think it's possible. Like a lot of people like to label my work intense. And I never think about that. I don't think about what intense is. I don't even know what that means. Oh, it's so edgy. I'm like, oh, it's like Reservoir Dogs. Not really, but whatever. Everybody needs a label. But right. You're right. And it's, even if you look at the first two, like if you look at TUTU GRANDE and BUGTUSSLE, they were written more like, shooting theater.
Yeah, definitely.
When Brain Slut is like the opposite.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's very visual.
Thank you for that segue, by the way. You want to talk about Brain Slut now? We could go there. Brain Slut.
Brain Slut, yes.
Okay.
And you read it?
Yes, I did. Yes. Yeah.
So unlike the TUTU GRANDE and BUGTUSSLE, this is still very character driven and a very, very challenging performance. But it still, we're looking at a broken human being, and his objective throughout the night, and a lot of backstory, a lot of history. But in writing it, there's, instead of being a dialogue heavy script, it's more of almost more of a visual cinematic experience than it will be a dialogue heavy. I mean, there's a lot more locations. There's a lot of scenes without dialogue at all. And I think it's, from what I'm learning more about, I mean, even though I love shooting, like TUTU GRANDE, I think took 5 hours. We shot BUGTUSSLE in a day. This is going to take probably a week, because it requires a lot more setup. There's a lot more visuals are very, very important because of the circumstance this character is dealing with. So in writing this, I think it's a step up for me as a writer for cinema, where I'm really looking at motion pictures rather than character study, simple, one location, let's shoot it. Because it's eventually what's going to lead into a feature. I'm not sure what the first feature will be yet. I've got probably 4 scripts and 1,000 ideas, but I wanted to really explore a short that is not just character driven, but more of a cinematic visual experience. Because the other 2 films have been mostly performance. And yeah, there's some great sound design, there's some great photography in it, music, that is very effective in helping tell these character stories. This one's got a lot of great visuals, and I've not to be a spoiler, but I'm playing with color, I'm playing with symbolism, I'm playing with metaphors. There's a lot of things going on throughout the night.
Yeah.
That I think is more of a cinematic experience, visually, musically, until you. And again, at the end, there's still a bunch of questions.
Yeah, I think you're playing with reality in a way with Brain Slut, right? Because I don't know what it's gonna look like, but my sense is that it's like we're gonna see kind of what he's seeing, what the character is, what he's experiencing on the inside. How is that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting for me when I was writing it, looking at how you can very specifically, there's nothing random ever, shouldn't be anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is very specific in what occurs throughout that night in Brain Slut. Everything's so specific. And from the very first opening shot to the very last shot, and everything that happens within that night is this character is experiencing. Now, what the viewer's not going to know, and how I kind of set it up, and it will change. I've already have another draft since the one I sent you. There are dialogue that will change. There are things that will change because I'll find a better way to execute it. I'll find a better line that is simpler and better. But every event that takes place throughout the night, you're never going to know is this real? 2, is this a side effect? Is this an hallucination? Is this a dream? Is any of this real? What exactly? So, and you have a setup at the beginning between the older woman and Nick. And what exactly is an alarm bag? And what's going to happen? And what is this pill? And you have a setup, and then all of a sudden these things begin to happen to Philip throughout the night. There's a lot of questions of what is going on. And it's all very specific to a very specific event that you see at the end. that explains everything that's happened throughout the night. However,
It's a big surprise.
you really don't. Yeah, I mean, and there's a little surprise at the end. He's like, "Oh, didn't expect to see that. I thought the whole thing was that." But it, for me, and I could tell you privately, because I think I would spoil it, but there's two real possibilities of what's actually happening. And if I told you one, I almost had a line in there and I removed it. I'm like, nope, that's too much information.
Okay.
I don't want that much information. But the journey of the mind, the journey on drugs, the journey of withdrawing from drugs, the journey of anxiety, depression, mental illness, the things that happen in your body. You know, there's a line in there, and it probably will change because there are things living inside me. And it's important that, because it's so true when you're experiencing a cycle of intense anxiety or panic even. I used to have panic attacks, don't have them anymore, but that's a whole nother story. But your mind and the chemicals of the mind, and when they are altered, whether it's an imbalance, whether it's medication, whatever's going on with your brain chemistry that cannot be balanced in the blood panel, we don't really know exactly what's going on. I wanted to express and you see him throughout the night, progressively getting worse.
Mm.
And I wanted to show and reveal that the human brain and the altered brain chemistry and then I also address other things like pharma play and there's a lot of underlying things that are inside it intentionally, but the story is his journey to the morning, which is important. And it's, again, goes back to what I spoke about personally, the moment where you quote unquote wake up.
Yeah.
Which is when you become present, when you truly wake up to the present, when everything's right here, right now, when that really happens, when there's no more fear in the moment, when there's no more judgment, there's no more worry or crap. It's just right here, right now, all the time. When you really truly wake up to that, it's such a magical experience and such a liberating, freeing experience. But I don't think most people can reach that unless they cross that dark bridge. Yeah. And that's kind of the story I wanted to tell.
Yeah. And let's go back a bit in the mental health journey, because earlier you were talking about the doctors kind of giving you all these pills. You know, you took, I don't know,
I couldn't tell you how many.
And I feel like with Brain Slut, you're really looking at, because he's a brain slut, right? Forgive me, because I'm new to this concept. I just looked it up yesterday. So but to me, that's almost like a metaphor for, I mean, I know it's real, or maybe metaphor is not the right word. Maybe it's a parallel to what you go through as a patient, as being.
Oh yeah, you're a guinea pig.
Yeah.
You're a guinea pig.
Yeah.
But what happens though, this is what happens is, it happened to me. I didn't go out volunteering for drug research trials, but you again, you don't go to the doctor and get a blood panel and it show you what all your brain chemistry is doing. It doesn't show you what tricyclics are doing. It doesn't tell you what your adrenaline's doing. It doesn't tell you what, they don't have a ton of information. They do a CT scan. They can look at the activity, brain activity, and what's going on. But there's not a lot way to manage it. So a lot of it's guesswork. They don't know what medication. They don't know what dosage. Most of them don't have the illness themselves, so it's learned from a textbook. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to be good. You're going to have to be insightful and aware, observing behavior of a patient and what's particularly wrong. So then you have to start playing with meds. And like, I know so many people who are clearly not doing well, and their primary physician will just randomly prescribe them antidepressant. And I'm like, well, you're not qualified to do that. I mean, you can tell if I have a sinus infection, but you know what? When you're dealing with brain chemistry, you need a specialist, and you need a good one. And I used to tell people, like, you need to go see a psychiatrist, and you need to find a good one, because the wrong medication can make you worse. And then where pharma play comes into it, and where the brain slut portion becomes dangerous, is when you are given a medication that actually works, psychoactive medication. And I take medication. I take medication every day. But when you've lived a life of anxiety and fear and depression, and all of a sudden a pill makes that go away, it's very dangerous. And that leads us to addiction and all kinds of other problems in our society. But let's look at the reality is, I don't care if it's Xanax or heroin, they just want to feel better. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. I'm unhappy, I don't feel good, and this makes me feel good. You're sick, and the medicine makes me better. So when a physician, and particularly a psychiatrist, wants to find out what's going on. So when you're the first time somebody gave me a benzodiazepine, I was like, oh my God, it was euphoric. I'd never felt so calm and relaxed my entire life. Is this how normal people feel? Because this is amazing. And then eventually, there was at one point I was on, I think, 6 pills a day, sometimes some of them twice a day. Mm-hmm. And then you felt toxic. And then you drink on top of it. Then you're a complete mess. So what happens is that journey of trying to figure out what's going to work for you. What can you do? What can't you do? Lifestyle changes. There's so much of a process. But when this book, where I actually found the term brain sluts, called Guinea Pig Zero, it's a fascinating book. And talks about how people who are inner, it could be, for instance, the character Philip in Brain Slut, he had a traumatic event that emotionally, physically damaged him. And in the hospital, you know, he's being treated. You know, he's, you know, given medication. He's in rehab, physical, that impacted brain activity. So how Western medicine works is meds. It's how we fix things. So this particular character, and I understand it from my own experience, is that you could very easily, and I think that's why we have such a problem with drugs and alcohol, and particularly in the States, is that's how we fix things. It's readily available. It's easy to get. And there's such a stigma attached to it, which is unfortunate because you have to, again, look at it. People just want to be happy and it makes them feel better. And I think we do have to address, why are you so unhappy? Because I think we are an unhappy nation. And I do think people run around with a bunch of hate and anger and anxiety and fear. And that's what you see on the news. That's what you see on the television. That's what you see out in the world. And yet we don't just discuss and say it's perfectly normal to have a bad day.
Yeah.
It's perfectly normal to be anxious sometimes. Yes, some people have different struggles that do need to be treated, but there are other ways to treat it and become present and mindful than becoming an addict or a brain slut, where you are actively seeking out drug research trials for drugs every opportunity you can get so you can stay high, to avoid what's real. Even though what's real may be unpleasant, there is a way out. So that's where Brain Slut came from, because there's a lot going on. And I love the fact that he has a drug agent too. It's just so typical.
Yes. Is there a connection between Brain Slut and Second Sleep?
Yeah, it's the same story.
Oh.
Second Sleep, well, it's a different script.
Okay.
Entirely different script. Same story. Second Sleep never got completed.
Okay.
We had shot. I know we'd shot the opening scene with actor Fred Lane. He's a good friend of mine. So he came up. He was playing Nick. We had shot that opening scene, and I really prepared for this role. And he was a mess, and I was kind of a mess too. Then I think during the production, the co-director was just kind of disappeared. And we don't even know where the footage is.
Oh, wow.
So it just didn't get finished. So he had made a trailer. We were all very excited about it. There was a lot of press about it. And so this is the opportunity to retell well, actually tell the story in a short form and really examine the potential to make a feature story, because there's a backstory and a lot going on with Philip. And so, yeah, it's the same. And I changed the title. Brain slut's actually very, I want to know what that means when I see it. Like, what is that? Second sleep was simply a metaphor of, I don't know if you term, when people used to do a lot of their trading in the middle of the night when it was cool. So they would go to sleep, wake up in the middle of the night, do their trading with their wagons and horses, and then when it was cooler, then go back and have their second sleep.
Okay.
And I thought it was a fantastic title of he's asleep. He was born and was awake. Now he's in his second sleep. And we need to wake up.
Yeah.
And I thought it was, but I just think Brain Slut, it's going to have a more rapid reaction, particularly in the festival circuit, of what is that? Is it a horror film? What is it?
Yeah.
It's enticing to know
Yes.
what exactly a brain slit is.
Mm-hmm.
Second sleep is, even though I still love the title, is, I think it's like, it could be a wallowing melodrama.
Yeah. No, I like the title Brain Slut. Because it got me, I immediately went and Googled it. So what is a brain slut?
Well, it'd be hard to find. I mean, I think Urban Dictionary, I think somebody put something up in there about it, but there's very little about it.
Yeah.
If you look at but when I was reading, when I read a lot, there are certain terms that jump out at me. And I remember reading this Guinea Pig Zero book, and Brain Slut came out. I'm like, whoa, what is that? That's beautiful. And it jumped out at me like when titles are important to me, but I don't. I'd rather have them intriguing and kind of, when you Google, it's like the only thing that's going to show up. I kind of like that idea. It's kind of like Volcanic Theatre Pub. There's not another Volcanic Theatre Pub in the world.
Yeah. Wow.
So when you Google Volcanic Theatre, we're going to be the only thing that pops up. TUTU GRANDE was similar. I didn't even have a title for it. But I went and we were ready to shoot. And I went on Amazon going, I need to find I went to Google, large man's tutu. First thing that popped up was TUTU GRANDE. Title! It was it. I'm like, oh yeah, gotta have that. BUGTUSSLE was, it's a community right outside my hometown. Speaker of the House, Carl Albert, was actually born there. And so it does kind of represents every small town America for me.
Yeah.
It also, the reference to the Beverly Hillbillies, which is ideal for them dreaming to go to Beverly Hills, where they're not really going to fit in. And also, I think we talked about that. I love the idea that fighting with bugs and tussling with bugs is very similar to always dealing with your demons. So Brain Slut, I think, is the same thing. It's like, I don't think there's going to be anything else on the internet except Brain Slut. If you bug tussle, there'll be other things that pop up. But
Yeah.
you do a BUGTUSSLE movie, it's the only thing that's going to pop up.
Yeah.
So titles are important, but I think you really got to be careful and not, people do it all the time. It's so generic. Even the name of their business,
Yeah.
you be original.
Yeah.
Because when you're dealing with the world of the World Wide Web, you need to be found. So you do have to consider a title.
True. All right. So speaking of the Volcanic Theatre Pub, it came out of you had the Actors Realm, and that was all kind of tied in, right?
Yeah. So when I moved to Bend, like, what's an actor from LA going to do in Bend, Oregon? So the first thing I did, there's a community college in Bend.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this community learning, continuing education portion of the college. So I started teaching there, teaching classes. The classes became very popular. Then I ended up with 3 or 4 classes, I think, covering different topics of acting and storytelling. And then I discovered that when these classes ended, because usually they're only like 6 weeks, once a week, you're not going to learn anything really in that short amount of time about what we really do. So, but they all wanted more. So people were pushing me into, hey, let's make this a weekly studio thing. I'm like, okay, so I rented a space. And then that's what created the Actors Realm. And out of that became Volcanic Theatre, where we were doing plays in pubs. So I think the first one was a Mammoth play called Bobby Golden Hell, where we did it. I think first one was Silver Moon Brewing in Bend. And then we did a Zoo Story, Edward Albee, in a pub. I think a few locations actually around town. And these were all using my students, and I would be there on their stage because most of them had zero experience. All they knew was how I worked, which was beneficial because they weren't corrupted. You could take somebody's been doing community theater for 20 years. It's going to be impossible to say, stop that. Don't do that. Bring it down. They'd have to relearn the entire craft because they've been taught to present, which is actually the opposite experience. So it was beneficial that knowing that the audience is just the flies on the wall. They're just in the room. They're overhearing the performances. It's just between you and me now, man. Just you and me. All we have to do is be together. You need to want something. And I want something that's conflicted, and we're going to have drama. And once they learned that, when we started doing the plays, one of my students, is a dear friend of mine, still is, was an architect, and he wanted out. He said to me one day, hey, you know that pub theater thing you always talk about? I said, yeah. He goes, you want to do it? I'm like, what? He goes, I'm gonna leave my job and open up this theater with you. I'm like, okay. I said, let's do it. And so we had to find a location. And he'd been in a couple of plays with me, Zoo Story and Bobby Golden Hell. He was fascinated with the idea of having a pub theater. And it grew from like when we first opened, we were doing film screenings and live theater, live music. It just blew up because I don't think they experienced a great deal of theater like what we were doing. In fact, it's pretty rare anywhere you go, but they certainly have experienced something so real. May not have been their thing, but they knew it's something. Whoa, this is dangerous. It's suspenseful. It's intense. The space itself, because he was an architect and I was essentially a contractor. So he would go, oh, I think we need to do this. All right, I'll put it in. And we essentially built it ourselves. So we found an old warehouse, built it ourselves. We were most of the labor. And then we opened up a theater.
Did I lose you? Uh-oh. Okay. I think we're okay. We have about 7 minutes left.
Okay.
If you're okay with it, I'd love to keep going, but if you have to go, I totally understand. So
we can keep going. I have nothing going on. I gotta make a couple phone calls, but later on. But yeah, we're good.
okay. Yeah, so the Volcanic Theatre Pub, that's pretty incredible. And now that's kind of, that chapter is closing, right? I mean, are you still kind of, you're not involved with it at all, or it's done?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, selling it was the whole point, was to get out.
Okay.
I mean, I still deal with emails, messages, and things like that. Pretty much every day, I have to explain I'm no longer the the owner. I'm no longer the talent buyer. I'm no longer the manager. And agencies and artists still contact me and say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm out." You know, and I think it was, in short, pandemic was, for any theater, any gathering place, was tough because, especially in Oregon, you're shut out. You're done. You cannot open. And that was for a year. Then, oh, you can open for half cap. I'm like, well, I don't have anything to put on. And is it safe?
Yeah.
And then, then you're closed again.
Yeah.
Then you're open back up. And then, like, and it was so stressful. And that, in addition to not doing any performances, any play performances, and film screenings. I mean, we did some film screenings, but opening up the pub theater was always about having theater. Everything else was a bonus. But we got so popular so quickly because we designed the room with acoustics in mind first. Then aesthetics became second. We wanted to keep the warehouse black box feel. We wanted to sound good. We needed the sound to be soaked up. So, especially in the theater, with actors talking at a normal volume, you wanted everybody to be able to hear it. But it really translated really well to music. People loved playing in the room. And agencies. All of a sudden, I don't know, within 3-4 years, I was, we were doing 250 events a year. maybe more, because we were so sought after doing live music and other type of live performances, where I didn't have time to rehearse, or I didn't have time to go, oh, I need set aside 3 weekends so I can do this play, because everything is booked so much in advance. And so when you're booking these emails and they're just coming in every day, you get hundreds of emails. You're just like, okay. I became a booking agent. I became a talent buyer. And it was fun, but that's not who I am. And what I learned is, and isolation is a big thing for me, is when you isolate me away from people, away from connectivity, away from self-expression, artistic expression, I don't do well. I need to have that. So being at the theater and around people and around other artists, whether it's music or whatever, was still healthy. But it got to a point where I was just not, I'd shot a couple little short films with these, but I wasn't pursuing what I think I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So it was time to give it up.
That makes
and it
sense.
was, it was your baby, and it was kind of a tough decision to go, okay, I'm out. But the future and the potential for everything that's the doors that are opening up for me now is so much more exciting than running a theater in Bend, Oregon, because I'm going to be all over the place. I'll probably be a festival director for a film festival. I'll probably be a music agent, just booking talent. I'll probably be working as an actor again, probably doing more theater. It's just opened up a whole bunch of opportunity again, which is very exciting. And I'm traveling a ton. It was the right choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that it was essential to the community and important to the community, which I'm very grateful for. And I think they were very grateful for the theater. But it wasn't healthy for me to keep running it.
Okay. So we talked about, I think we got to all of your films, and we managed to get in Volcanic Theatre Pub, and we talked about mental health, which I could talk about all day with you.
Which is fine.
Yeah. Okay. So, you were basically kind of like the John Dennis in Bend, Oregon. Would you say, is that kind of a good, I don't know, you were teaching acting at the community college. You started the actor's realm, and then you kind of put on your business hat and did the Volcanic Theatre Works with your architect friend who helped you build that. And then, but now it's like, you're kind of tired of the entrepreneur hat, and you want to go back and do the more, go back to doing what, I guess,
Well, yeah.
film.
I think if you go as far back as a teenager to now, in my mid-50s, the one constant theme for me is I create. That's who I am. I often am asked, where do you come up with that shit? I'm like, well, that's the eternal question, right? I don't know. comes out.
What else would you? Yeah.
It's what I do.
Yeah.
And it's what my brain does. Now, whether bipolar disorder has anything to do with it, I don't know and don't care. I love how David Lynch describes it. He describes creativity because when he said it, I went, I understand that, dude. He said, and I do meditate. I have to, but he talks about transcendental meditation a lot. He has actually a film school that main focus is on writing and transcendental meditation. But he said ideas, and he's very visual, probably much more visual than I am in his approach. But he'll start with pictures. He'll see something, and he talks about, for me, it's vocal. I'll be driving around on my motorcycle or in my Jeep. I don't have radio on. I don't have music on. I daydream. I allow things to just come out. And I talk to myself a lot. And that's oftentimes where a piece of dialogue could start an idea. And Lynch describes it as, there's an idea. It's not a story, but it's an idea. But it's a little bitty one. But throw that one in, it's like fishing. And that fish is going to catch a bigger fish. Throw that one in, and that's going to catch a bigger fish. And the fish keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger until you finally have a story. And you don't know, again, where they come from originally, or even how they evolve. Sometimes it's just sitting down and writing, and things just start flowing and coming to you. Other times, David Mamet describes writing, which is also, I'm like, I understand that. He says, when you're writing, you have an idea, but all of a sudden you get stuck. And I always get stuck. I'm like, what do I do now? And he goes, you're going to get stuck. But here's the great thing about it. You are going to find a way out of it. Because the character's got to find a way out of it. And you're going to find a way out of it. But here's the great thing about it. The audience is going to get stuck too. And they're going to wonder, how the hell is he going to get out of it? I'm like, oh, it's beautiful. It's not only normal, it's beneficial for the story. Because it moves the audience to go, what's he going to do now? How's he going to get out of this mess?
Yeah.
So I love the idea of how similar many artists are in their creation, and then also how different we are because of where we come from. Like my stories usually, if you have a recurring voice in it, you know, they are broken, damaged people, and usually rural America. And if you look at Mamet, almost always Chicago. Shepard, he loved the West. Steinbeck loved the Dust Bowl Okie area, like Bakersfield and Visalia and up in towards Northern California. They had specific voices and recurring themes. And it's fascinating to me. It's like, oh, like I hope to someday capture this. But but I love seeing an image from a film. Have you ever seen played the game Framed?
No.
It's very similar to Wordle. Every night, Framed puts up an image, screenshot, and you get 6 guesses what film that is.
Oh.
Some you go, boom, know what that is. Some are so obscure, you're like, well, that could be anything. I don't know what that is. Maybe I haven't even seen it. But what I do love is when I see a trailer or an image from a film, I can identify that director right away. Like you only need one image to know a Wes Anderson film. It's Wes Anderson. Like, I know who that is. Again, it becomes more of a cinematic motion picture visual experience. Sometimes you know what a Scorsese film is. Many people try to, like when they did Joker with Joaquin Phoenix,
Right.
they try to replicate Taxi Driver because the overall feeling of being in New York is so vibrant in Taxi Driver. You always know you're in New York in a Scorsese film.
True.
Differently than Woody Allen in Manhattan. It's a different New York.
Yeah.
Spike Lee, Tim Burton. Immediate, it's a Tim Burton film in one image. I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever be that visually minded as a director. Might be more like a Darren Aronofsky, who is more of a character-driven film director that, Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan, The Wrestler, The Whale.
Yeah.
There's I have to say this. There's do you remember American Playhouse? It was a television program. It was similar to Masterpiece Theater. American Playhouse would have these Broadway shows, but they would go on set with their video cameras and shoot and edit and piece together the play and put it on TV. Well, they did. Now, I was already a big fan of Steppenwolf at this time. But they had a production of True West, the original, with Malkovich and Sinise. Sinise directed and also played Austin, and Malkovich played Lee. And nobody knew who either one of these guys were, but they showed up on Broadway. And then Malkovich was instant stardom. Malkovich had never auditioned for a role in his life. True West just catapulted him into stratospheric star from that one performance. I watched that so many times that it probably could have ruined my career, because I found it as an acting Bible because the way they approached it. And I tried to share copies of this VHS tape to everybody I ran into. You have to watch this because Malkovich is brilliant. He's stunning. The performance is a little self-indulgent, but that approach, that American Playhouse production of shooting a play, like, oh, I want to do that. I think that's where everything started for me is, oh, you can definitely write a play and shoot it. A lot of people adapt. Many people adapt. plays into film. Another Steppenwolf actor, Tracy Letts, who's from Oklahoma. His plays are all adapted into film. There's August Osage County, because he's at Steppenwolf, and he wrote that specifically for the cast of actors they had at Steppenwolf. He wrote it for that. He wrote Bug, if you've seen that, with what's the girl's? I love her. She'll come to me in a minute. But John Patrick Shanley, also a playwright that I absolutely adore, his films like Doubt, A Parable with Meryl Streep and Philip Seymour Hoffman. When you look at their character-driven dramas with limited locations, I'm like, oh, this is precisely what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that's probably what I'll continue to do. But utilizing my own imagination and my own visuals I see in my head, and always being character driven, and always focusing on story. And for me, story is always, and for me, I always break it down, even to my students, to 5 things. And it starts with character. Number 1, always character. What does he want? What does he want? One person wants one thing. Start there. There's your story. That's your plot too. Their journey of getting what they want. It's fundamentally, it's pretty simple. Executing, not so easy, but pretty simple. Then you have obstacles in their way. That's drama. That's conflict. That's what tells the story. Then you have stakes. What happens if they get or don't get what they want? That creates suspense. That creates the intensity, and it then creates the vitality of what's happening in the story. Any good story. And then you have your how they get what they want. Reveals the type of person and type of character they are. It can reveal a whole biography of who these people were and who their parents were, and then finally it's commitment, personalize it, mean it. If you start there with those 5 things, you can tell a good story. You got to be passionate about it. And I think all the great voices of American film directors, and the great writers, and the great playwrights, great theater directors, almost all of them move into film. I can't think of any that haven't. I mean, Sam Shepard did it. Martin McDonough has done it very successfully. Albee, I mean, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is an enormous cinematic film. So that's probably going to be a through line for me, is shooting that way. Film students learn something completely different. They approach with, they learn camera technique. Which lenses to use? It's a completely different process than an actor's approach. So when you see an actor directing, even if they're directing themselves, like Gary Sinise, he directed him and Malkovich in Of Mice and Men, and it's a fantastic film.
Yeah.
And of course, you have Clint Eastwood, who does a movie every year. Spike Lee's in a lot of his own movies. But I think that experience as an actor and studying scripts and dissecting plays and dissecting characters gave me the opportunity and knowledge to actually have confidence to sit down and write something and be heavily influenced by people, but also have my own voice and understanding that this is what I'm going to write. Like sometimes John would question in BUGTUSSLE, like, what is this? What is this? I don't know what this line means. I don't know what this means. I'm like, well, he's intoxicated, John. I mean, how many times have you seen somebody intoxicated that just all of a sudden just goes off on something? It's like, where are you? And I had to explain, it's like, why does everybody have to be so mean?
Oh, yeah.
You can't trust nobody. He goes, where does that come from? I'm like, because John, he just realized he's been screwed over and he's intoxicated again. And I said, just take a deep breath and tell the universe that. And he took the note. And that's when you see him up to the gods. See, why does everybody have to be so mean? So being a writer and having the confidence as a writer is growing. But again, still always heavily influenced by playwrights and Pulitzer prize-winning playwrights that are damn good at what they do. That would be always my goal. To be a Gary Sinise, to be a Martin McDonough. And Martin McDonough's an interesting story. His plays, I've done several of them. His first film was in Bruges with Colin Farrell. Mm-hmm. Same cast that's in Banshees of Inisherin. Mm. But he based that story on The Dumbwaiter by Harold Pinter, which I'd also done. So it's always fascinating to me to find out where these people get their ideas, their influences, and I'm like, oh, we're not all that different, really.
Yeah,
our processes and how we get there differ, but the creation, when you are an artist, when you are a creator, I think everyone has something in common. Process is probably a little different, but how we're influenced, that's such a big deal, though, how we're influenced.
Yeah.
Our childhoods, the people we ran around with, the people we dated, the people that shaped our adolescence, and then into our teenage years, and then into college, and then into adulthood and marriage and having children. I mean, all these things shape us who we are, in addition to, your struggles and your triumphs. And I think we always go back to our roots.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me.
Yeah.
And we've done Banshees back in Ireland, where he's from. And I think it's his best film. And he's always going to go back there, and he should. And Sam Shepard always wrote about his dad. It was such a profound thing for him. In every play, he mentions his dad, and he always mentions him not being there.
Oh. So would you ever go back to Oklahoma?
See my mom, and then that's it. I mean, I love where I'm from. I embrace being an Okie. I love a lot of people there. My childhood was good. I found out was much different than people that once I got to college and understood that people actually got along with each other, that families weren't always angry at each other. Families, they were like my wife's parents. For some, I'm like, oh my God, it's Ozzy and Harriet. I didn't know these people existed. It's a different culture for sure, but I love the fact that that's where I'm from. But there just wouldn't be a great deal of opportunity there for me. I love my mom, and there's a lot of people there that friends you went to school with, and I'm not real close with any of them. But I'd go to visit. I'd love to see a lot of people, but no, I don't. I certainly wouldn't live there.
Yeah, not to live there. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, get that. I mean, it's just it's complicated. Like, yeah.
I'd go back to Louisiana before I go to Oklahoma, because it's southern Louisiana is culturally rich. I mean, it's there's a lot going on.
Oh yeah.
Because we haven't talked about it, but when I went to when I decided to go to grad school, I had lots of options actually, but I chose LSU because in one of John Dennis, and because of the culture. I was fascinated with New Orleans and southern Louisiana, much more than the other places. But I wanted to experience that vibrant, swampy, bluesy,
interesting,
Creole, Cajun. I just wanted to dive into it. So I was first semester, first play, main stage. I was the lead, and I don't know how I did so many plays at LSU. I was actually going from a main stage production into rehearsal for a black box production. Then after that, I was going to band rehearsal or to a gig. And I did that for 3 years. So in addition to the classes, I was in play rehearsals almost every night, or in production almost every night, and then going to a black box production, and then going to band rehearsal, and then also teaching advanced acting to undergrads. So I was so busy in 3 years there. I did so much that I look back on it once I was diagnosed with bipolar. And after people were making comments about me in graduate school, everything made sense. I'm like, of course I did it. Okay. Of course I double majored in undergrad because I had the energy to do it. I was doing 5 plays a year and double majoring. Of course I did it. I had the energy. People like, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, just do it. You look back on it and go, oh, I was manic. Of course. Yeah. In your 20s, your body can handle it. You could just go. And you had a lot of, I had the innate ability before even the training to believe those circumstances very quickly. Realism came easy to me quickly. The other stuff wasn't so easy for me. But You give me Sam Shepard, Mamet, Tennessee Williams, I'm in there. Give me Shakespeare, I'm like, okay, what is this?
Okay.
Wait, I don't know what this is. I remember Barry Kyle telling me I was doing Hamlet, and he said something. Eventually, it made sense. He goes, Derek, you are, I feel, therefore I am. He said, you're like, you get on an emotional surfboard, and once you hit that emotion, you just start riding it. We have to go, Derek, Hamlet's over here. And you go, okay. And you start riding it over there. And everything was just guttural and visceral, and everything had to be that. And he said, not everything is method acting, Derek. I'm like, yeah, it is.
So you played for Hamlet in the play?
It was scene work.
Oh, okay.
In class. Barry was teaching. And it was an Oh Wild Rogue speech. And it was, and even JD said something to me once. We were doing Chekhov, and I was playing Trigorin, the seagull. And all of a sudden I was, I just started banging my head on the table. And I was there. And he stopped. Derek, what? What are you doing? I don't know. I'm upset. And he just shakes his head. Derek, not every character's from Oklahoma. And I thought he was talking about my accent.
Oh, okay.
Later on, I realized, this is turn of the century Russia. People just don't randomly go around banging their head on stuff. This is a different culture. So the experience at LSU, not only did JD is so insightful and recognized who I was very quickly, American realism came easy to me, where the other stuff was quite the struggle.
Yeah.
Because I had to believe it and feel it. Pretend was didn't work for me. Technique didn't work for me, because I felt if you could passionately thrust yourself into an objective, all the other elements of the acting craft fall into place. You'll be heard. You'll know where to go. Your blocking will be taken care of. Everything's done. That's how I work. And to this day, that's still how I work, because it's where I'm the most effective as an actor, and probably as a writer and a director. The other stuff they talked about, epic theater, and like, I didn't find any use in it, because Barry and JD could not be any more different. And when Barry cast me in the first big main stage production, and I was playing a Nazi SS officer, but it was completely different work, and I didn't understand it. I do now, of course, but at that time, everything was just outrageous and intense and dysfunctional and broken, and I still deal with those people, but I understood that not everybody's from small town Oklahoma, and not every play or character is written because JD said, I'd like once for you to play a bank teller, because I'd like to see you play somebody where there's not something wrong with them. I said, I don't know how to do that. And I don't know why I would. So that's where it all started. I play broken people. I write about broken people.
Broken people.
Damaged, outrageous circumstances that to me aren't that outrageous.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've experienced it. I know those people.
You play like your thing is the broken people who are broken. Like they're not hiding it. They're not, I don't know. Is that what you mean?
They're visibly,
Yeah.
noticeably
broken,
damaged, and
like because
not every character is different. I mean, some are much more subtle about it.
like with
Some
Chekhov,
are much more.
yeah. Like with Chekhov, it's like the characters are like there's like a repression. Is that?
Oh yeah. I mean, they're people forget that they are comedies,
Yeah.
and the repressed and the depressed of these characters in these worlds. You have discovered Chekhov, and once you've realized Chekhov, same with Shakespeare. I learned about Shakespeare. There is, once you learn the brilliance, the genius of Shakespeare, and trust the meter, and trust the rhythm, what happens to you internally is written in the music of the rhythm of the meter. So you just trust it, and it'll take you there. You don't have to, dive into it like you're doing Tennessee Williams. You trust the meter. Chekhov is the same thing as you have to trust turn of the century Russia at that time, and understand that this is how these people behaved. And silent dysfunction is much more difficult to portray than the outrageous dysfunction. But once you learn how to do it, like I was doing a main stage play called Mad Forest at LSU. And one of the scenes, the director said, I don't want you to move. I said, what? Don't move. Just stay still, standing the entire scene. I'm like, no, because that's not who I was. I've never done that before in my life. I'm not, what? And I did it. And it felt uncomfortable as hell. And I kept doing it. I'll send you a picture. It was me and Sean Bridgers. Sean Bridgers from Deadwood. Do you know Deadwood?
No.
So Sean's had a pretty successful film television career. And we did quite a few plays together. And anyway, what I learned was, if you take all the energy that I had and focused it and just stood still and put every single ounce of it into your objective, it actually became more powerful than somebody that was more kinetic. And JD taught me that, particularly for film, that's why you see a performance like TUTU GRANDE, where he's appears to be very grounded.
Yeah.
But he's very, very dangerous.
Yes.
Because of the stillness. Unlike Coy, who's complete opposite.
Yeah.
And you know, and when you learn those techniques, in different circumstances, different characters, it and when you're writing, not just for yourself but for other characters, you've got to really put your mind and go, okay, this is not how I would do it, because this is a completely different character, probably one I'm not going to play. And then you have to write that down with the same energy and stillness, and understand that how the performance is going to go. So like in BUGTUSSLE, originally didn't know who was going to be Crow or Coyote. I didn't have it cast, and probably was going to play Crow. When then John said to me, I like put my hat in if you ever do this for Crow. But then it came to a time like, you know what, guys, let's shoot this thing. And I just called up John and said, hey, you want to do this? Yeah. Well, this is when we're doing it. Can you do it? Yeah. All right. And I called up Taylor, said, this is when we're going to do it, where we're going to do it. Let's do it. And by God, I'll play Coyote because it's during a pandemic. The fewer people we have on set, the better. There were 6 of us, 3 cast members, 3 crew members. That was it, one day. And playing Coyote with John was a whole lot of fun, because Coyote's he's unhinged. He's in a spectrum too. There's a lot going on with that guy.
Oh, you had the best costume in the movie, that's for sure.
Took me forever to find that shirt. It was actually a women's shirt.
Oh.
And I had to wear, really a lot of weight, wore really baggy clothes to make me appear even smaller. Because I want him to be that little wiry, little, almost meth addicted little, kind of unhinged guy that might just pop off at any moment. And innocent and childlike, not Lenny.
Yeah.
To say, but still simple, innocent, childlike, yet dangerous. And that was kind of the goal with Coyote, and to understand him. And he's kind of funny too. He's and the script was written to be I don't say a comedy for sure, but it was written, the circumstances is pretty outrageous.
Dark comedy, yeah.
It's absurd. Beverly Hills is an hour and a half down the road, guys. Just FYI. It's not that long of a drive. But for them, and I understood this, it's like when I grew up, people going to Tulsa was a major life decision. I'm like, just go. It's 80 miles. But for those people with, in poverty, that dream of just going to Hollywood or Beverly Hills was a major obstacle and a major risk for them. And for a lot of people, it seemed impossible.
Unfortunately, very unfortunately, this was the abrupt end of the interview. But as Derek said, he said it best: endings are beginnings, new beginnings. Thank you for watching or listening. Bye.